Hello and welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter, and today we're going to be talking about anarchist philosophy, and we're going to do that via an essay right here. I printed this from the internet. It's free. It's Emma Goldman, and it is her essay, "The Individual, Society, and the State." Let me see if I can get that good thumbnail. I don't know if I can do it. Let's see here. Oh, I know. Let's make it funny. Okay, we got the thumbnail image. Okay, so we've done on this channel videos about Emma Goldman texts before, and check those out. Somewhere I'll link the playlist. But today we're going to do the individual, society, and the state. This is one of the essays I haven't done before. And this actually is a good example of, for me personally, but maybe it might be good just to discuss because you might be in the same situation. You're reading something and you're like, I'm not really feeling it. I don't know, I'm not really feeling what you're putting down, author. I don't know, I don't really agree. Almost to the point where it's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna stop reading. But after reading it, keep continuing to read it, then after a while, I'm like, okay, no, I'm starting to understand what you're saying, and actually, I agree. And I thought you were saying it this one way, but actually, you were saying it this different way that I was not expecting, or I misinterpreted what you were saying. And now I know. So I think this text is a good example for me personally. And maybe you, the viewer, that you continue reading. Continue reading a text, and you never know. It's not always the best thing to do to what they call DNF, did not finish. Sometimes that is the best thing to do. You don't want to waste your time, but in some situations, that might not be the best. And I actually read this during I'm part of a reading group, so reading groups and book clubs, they're actually good places where you can do that, right? Where you might be reading something and you might not be feeling it, right? You might not be, it might not be calling to you, but you're reading it because you're in this reading group or book club. And that's happened to me a lot. I've read stuff, and if it wasn't for the book club or the reading group, I probably would have stopped in the middle of it and wouldn't have continued. But I'm thankful for the reading group because I actually, this is a good essay. It's a good essay. So let me first start here. And again, you can print this out on the internet for free. It's also in a collection I think that I actually have that I featured in other videos. But yeah, you can print most of Emma Goldman's essays. Emma Goldman is a very influential anarchist philosopher. She wrote this in 1940. The year is there somewhere. Sorry, yeah, the year is there in 1940. And what I'm going to do is what I do on all of my videos. We read texts. We read the text. I pick individual quotes that speak out to me, and when we discuss it on the video, and then we continue the discussion via the YouTube comments, right? And then, we can have some philosophical discourse going on there. So this is paragraph 2, right? And let me read you this quote. Okay. The world is at a loss for a way out. Parliamentarism and democracy are on the decline. Salvation is being sought in fascism and other forms of strong, quotes, government. Okay. The struggle of opposing ideas now going on in the world involves social problems, urgently demanding a solution. So, right, she wrote this in 1940. That's when this essay was published. And the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because that's a lot like how the world is today, right? Democracy is on the decline. Parliamentary systems like the ones in the United Kingdom and such, not working in the favor of the people, right? Working more to the favor of the powerful. People are starting to turn to fascism. It's starting to speak to people, the populist movements and populist leaders who kind of use fascism as a way to exploit the needs and the wants of the people. And people are starting to turn that, have these strong men leaders in government that many people are starting to turn to and starting to believe in, and that's leading the world astray in many situations, as you can see just turning on the news, right? And yeah, so I just highlighted that just to show you, like, this is what's happening in the world today. Geopolitics, same stuff that was happening in the 1940s, right? The same thing that happened in the 1800s, 1700s. It's just the geopolitical situation that's happening now is nothing new. Strongmen leaders in government are exploiting the wants and the needs of the people, and they're using that populist language and methods of governance just promote their power in the guise that they're actually speaking for the people, right? They're catering toward the needs of the people, but really they're just catering to the needs of the very powerful. And in that way, democracy is on the decline. We see that in the country where I live in, the United States, where I'm from. Voting itself is in question. Is it fair? Is voting legitimate? And voting rights are being threatened and, quite literally being taken away. And it's all fueled by, fascist, like strong, quote unquote, government. So we're already beginning with like timeless, right, problems that, they're still relevant to today. So this essay is still relevant to today. Okay, so let me skip down a few paragraphs. So this is the second line of the 8th paragraph here. I will read. It has always been the individual that has accomplished every miracle in that sphere. And what sphere is Emma Goldman talking about? She's talking about the human endeavor for betterment, the human progression, societal growth. That's what she's talking about, this endeavor. So she's saying the individual has always been that. And let me finish the quote. It has always been the individual that has accomplished every miracle in that sphere, usually in spite of the prohibition, persecution, and interference by authority, human and divine. Right? So, so she's talking about, the state and government as opposed to like the actual like people, right? The individual person. And so this is where I kind of am a little dissonant with anarchism at first when I was reading this, because anarchism focuses so heavily on the individual. And that's kind of like my naivete, my ignorance, as I was reading it first, like, oh, here we go, this obsession with the individual rather than the collective, right? Rather than collaborative is like all about the individual, which is, you see that a lot in a lot of strongman government, right? A lot of fascism is about focusing on the individual. So that was very presumptuous of me, right? But I've just tried to give you my frame of thought as I'm reading this. Okay, so this is the beginning of the 11th paragraph. The individual is the true reality in life. I skip down a line. Man, the individual, has always been and necessarily is a sole source and motive power of evolution and progress. And she's using man as the universal reference to human beings, because this is really old school pre-woke era where now it's kind of appropriate, I think, now to use, we don't say man to refer to human beings. We just say human to people. But it's fine. Let's see. So I put question mark on the side of my margins, because I'm thinking, well, I don't know if like the individual has been the source of power and evolution. You're putting a lot of weight on the individual. I'm more about the collective, but not so much like in a communist sense, right? Even though, I'm not trying to throw shade on communism and those kinds of forms of governance necessarily. I'm just saying individuals working in a collaborative way, right, to solve huge problems that humans deal with. That is kind of the drive toward evolution and progress. It's more a collaboration, I think, not so much the individual. But let me continue, because she elaborates on this. And now I'll go to the 13th paragraph here. Individuality is not to be confused with the various ideas and concepts of individualism. Much less with that rugged individualism, quotes, rugged individualism, which is only a masked attempt to repress and defeat the individual and his individuality. Let me skip down, 2 lines. That corrupt and perverse individualism is the straitjacket of individuality. It has converted life into a degrading race for externals, for possession, for social prestige and supremacy. Okay, that's what I want to hear. When I read that, I'm like, oh, okay. That's what I'm talking about. So Emma Goldman makes a distinction between the individual or individuality and individualism, which is what's the difference? Well, individualism is like is this kind of sick ideology, to be quite frank. It's kind of this mythos, right? When I use the word mythos in the sense that it's not real. The whole idea like, pick yourself up from your bootstraps and, a man has to do his own thing and go his own way. And, that it's a dog-eat-dog world and you have to learn how to be self-sufficient. There's winners and there's losers. And you have to be a winner, right? And you can't be a loser. That type of individualism, that type of thinking, where it's like, it's you against the world, hustle. You have to do it on your own. You have to make it on your own. You're a big fish in a small pond. Then you go to the big pond with other big fish and you're competing with other big fish and you got to be the bigger of the fishes. That type of kind of ideology that's like kind of seeped into our culture, Western culture in general. I mean, you see it a lot in the East too. Let's not get it twisted. I like Emma Goldman's use of the word rugged because it is kind of like that. Gotta be rugged. You gotta pick yourselves up from your own bootstraps, pick up your belt, and pick yourself up because nobody else is gonna do it. You have to do it on your own. You know what I'm talking about? That kind of like you gotta make it on your own. No one's gonna help you but you. The type of hustle culture that you see all over the place, and it's just a myth. Independence, really, this obsession with independence, which doesn't really exist, really. Independence, nobody is really independent. Nobody really succeeds independently. We succeed interdependently, right? If that's a word, interdependence. Or to be more direct, we're all dependent on each other. Right? You look at anybody who's quote unquote successful, right? Even those people, even though they'll say, a lot of those people say, I made it on my own. No, you didn't. And I'm not even talking about like, money and resources. I'm a self-made man. No, you're not. Likely you did inherit some money, but even if, let's say you did, right? You still had mentors. Like you still had like people who believed in you, or maybe it might have been just one person. It was more likely more than one, but that it might have been that one person that started it that like had belief in you, because really that's the only way we're able to succeed, right? Someone has to be like, there's something in you. There's something, I see something in you. Let me give you some advice or give you some guidance or let me help you out, give you this resource because I see a potential. There's always this somebody that comes along, and if we don't have that, like it's not likely we'll succeed. Right? There's always everybody. We succeed because of each other. Nobody ever succeeds on their own. Right? So Okay, Emma Goldman is making that distinction. Now I'm like, all right, I'm reading. I'm with you, Miss Goldman. Let's see what else you have to say. So this is paragraph 14 in the fourth line. America is perhaps the best representative of this kind of individualism. Hello. In whose name political tyranny and social oppression are defended and held up as virtues, while every aspiration and attempt of man to gain freedom and social opportunity to live is denounced as un-American and evil in the name of that same individualism, right? We do that in America. We worship this whole idea of hyper independence. I mean, we even have a day called Independence Day, which is about the United States of America gaining its independence from Britain, right? But we have kind of taken that and just ran with it as a culture. And we just this is just a celebration of independence just generally. Like this idea a real man, and when I say man, I'm not using that in a universal sense of just, a real human being is a man. And if you're not a man, you're not, you're secondary, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the American way. A real man picks himself up by his own resources, makes his own resources, and does his own thing on his own. And only then can one truly become successful or be proud of himself, right? And if you start talking away from that, if you speak against that, you're like, well, no, that's actually not true, and that doesn't really happen. You people start saying oh, I guess you're not a real American. You're not a real man. You're just a little baby or sissy, or what are you? A real man steps up to the plate and with his own bat and swings with his own strength and hits that home run. I get what Emma Goldman is talking about here. She's really talking about how, America, we're quite obsessed with that. I'll continue though. There was a time when the state was unknown. She's talking about the state power. There was a time when there were no states. And let me skip down 3 lines. Human society then was not a state, but an association, italicized. A voluntary association for mutual protection and benefit. The elders and more experienced members were the guides and advisors of the people. They helped to manage the affairs of life, not to rule and dominate the individual. Okay, so I like the concept, right? Not a state, an association, a voluntary association for mutual protection and benefit, okay? Not just to serve the state. We were using the United States of America as an example, again, because that's the country I live in, right? That's where I'm from. It's like you sacrifice yourself for the state, America. You gotta do this for America. It's the American way. But what about the individual, right? What about the person, right? It's well, no, it's, you basically give up your individualism for the American idea of the individual, which serves the American state power, right? So are you really doing it for the individual? And this is what Emma Goldman is talking about. It's there's this ideology that's called individualism, which actually destroys the individual, because you're saying all this stuff pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, and really that's just you're conforming to this false idea and rejecting who you truly are as an individual. You're kind of okay, I'm gonna be this individual that America, the culture tells me I need to be. And let's just put aside who I actually am, but I'm gonna be the individual that America wants me to be. And by doing that, I reject my individuality, and also I serve the state rather than the actual individual, which is myself and just other individuals in general. We're all who are members of the state are rejecting our own individuality, and we're just giving it up in service of this idea of the individual that the state has given to us. Right? This is what she's talking about here. Now, you do have to be careful, because one of the things about like socialism, right, and anarchism, and just other philosophies, many philosophies, they kind of idealize the past, where it's like, there was a time in human society when there was no states, and then that was a time when people didn't exploit each other and everybody served each other in mutual benefit. And the elders, they helped people and they advised people. And you gotta understand, like back in those days, we're talking about prehistory, like people were exploiting each other. Just maybe it might not be the same way as it was, and it might not have been in such a massive scale as it is now, because there's more people that exist in the world now than there were then. But it wasn't necessarily the case that just because there was no state, there was no like exploitation by elders or something like. There was a lot of power, corruption, and people who were in power who exploited those who weren't in power, during the days of like pre-capitalism or state. You can just, if you become like an archaeologist or anthropologist, you can see like a lot of that going on, misuse of power. So that's the thing that you gotta be careful about, because a lot of times you do see this, or idealism of the past, or like, back before there were nations. Everybody was just kumbaya. Not necessarily, which is, and I bring it up because it's important to separate the idea from the reality. So this is a very good, it's a very good concept. Instead of a state and association, voluntary association, mutual protection and benefit. Okay, that's great, right? But was that actually happening in the past? Probably, oftentimes no. but that's something we should strive for, So I'm going to continue on the 17th paragraph here. The doctrine that man is evil, vicious, and too incompetent to know what is good for him, on this all government and oppression is built. Right. God and the state exist and are supported by this dogma. This is true. Right. So the idea is, what I was talking about before, we give up our individuality because, the society starts indoctrinates us and says, oh, as an individual, you are evil, vicious, or you're too incompetent. You need the state to condition you, whether that be God or the state or both, right? You need to be conditioned so that you're no longer evil or vicious or incompetent, right? And we're going to tell you how to be an individual. Like your actual individuality, you got to reject that because you're evil, you're vicious, you're incompetent. And we see that all the time, whether it's like, religion, the concept of Christianity, of course, the original sin, even stuff like religions like Buddhism, right? Where it's like you have to, you're in this cycle of suffering, and through meditation and the Eightfold Path, eventually you will become enlightened, but initially you are evil, vicious, and incompetent. Right? So, and not to throw shade on these various religions, I'm religious myself, but the state does use religion to cast aside people's individuality, to assume some manufactured individuality that can serve the state and promote state power. So let's continue to talk about how does the state do this. So this is the 21st paragraph on the essay. This is the last sentence. The fetishes of his own creation, and particularly so against the state. So I started in the middle of that sentence. So what the fetishes of? So first of all, of his, who is his? His is just the general humanity, is how Emma refers to the human society. He uses the male pronoun. So she's saying that humanity has created its own fetishes, right? Which eventually, to become free, human beings have to fight against their own fetishes that they've created, right? And some of those fetishes are religion and the state. Those are two big concepts or objects that have been fetishized. In what way? Let me continue reading. In former days, religious authority fashioned political life in the image of the church. The authority of the state, the rights of rulers came from on high. Power, like faith, was divine. The sanctity of the state, some have even clad it with infallibility and with godlike attributes. So they've combined the state and religion. The whole idea, like there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, which does not exist today in the slightest, right? Church and state, like the church is the state, and the state is the church. The whole God bless America, right? And you really see it to the most extreme with like things like Christian nationalism, right? Which is, basically like a fetishization. Hopefully that's a word. Or treating like Christianity and America as a kind of like fetish, right? Where like the nation, the United States of America, becomes a religion in and of itself. And in that way, like individuality is cast aside just for worship of this nation. That's how extreme it's become. And this is what Emma Goldman is talking about here. Like we're throwing away our individuality just so we can worship the state, right? And this is exactly how the state perpetuates and maintains its power, through this kind of religious state like fetish. Let me continue here. Inquiry was condemned as blasphemy. Like you can't even question, right? You can't even say, is this something we should do? Like, this is kind of wrong. Maybe we should separate church and state. Oh, you're not a patriot. You're un-American. You are you're blasphemous. And being un-American, right? Not being a patriot is equivalent to being a heretic, right? Or being blasphemous, like you're mixing the religion and the nation together. You see what I'm saying? Let me continue here. Servitude was the highest virtue. Servitude is the highest virtue. Being an American citizen, that's the highest virtue, being an American, right? Embracing American values. And I'm just using the United States of America as an example because that's where I'm from. But fill in a blank with any country. The state values. Any country, or should I say, state. By such percepts and training, certain things came to be regarded as self-evident, as sacred of their truth, but because of constant and persistent repetition, right? So these ideals, these state ideals, are just so ingrained in us, we start accepting them as the ultimate reality, right? And to speak against them is to speak against reality itself. Like, oh, there's no way that could be true, right? If you start accepting your individuality, your true individuality, and it doesn't align with the values of the state, you're attacked by society. You're like, well, you can't embrace those attributes because they don't exist, because they don't align with the state, therefore they don't exist, right? And we see that today, right? So this is the 29th paragraph, right? The state, every government, whatever its form, character, or color, be it absolute or constitutional, monarchy or republic, fascist, Nazi, or Bolshevik, is by its very nature conservative. Okay? Static, intolerant of change, and opposed to it. We worship conservatism. Conservatism, in a more political sense. People are like, we need to go back to our old school values, the way it was, the way, this this whole being radical, like there's something wrong with that. This extreme change, extremism is something we have to be careful about, right? And it's true, like, certain kinds of extremism, like Christian nationalism, that's an extremist point of view. You do need to be careful about. And, not all conservatism is bad. It's particularly in the traditional sense of conservatism, right? But I'm talking more so with the whole political right, and the political left, where the left is supposed to be liberalism, and, the right is conservatism, and this is what I'm talking about, right? Intolerant to change. Okay, opposed to change. Okay, but let me continue. Whatever changes it undergoes are always the result of pressure exerted upon it, pressure strong enough to compel the ruling powers to submit peacefully or otherwise, generally otherwise, that is, by revolution. Okay, and what she's saying, Emma Goldman is saying here, is the state has this very static idea of what you're supposed to be. And if you oppose that idea of what you're supposed to be, you get extreme resistance, right, by the state. But progress, she's saying, only happens through that resistance, through that change of like, well, the state is telling me I'm supposed to be like this, but that's not actually who I am or what reality is. And when that pushback happens, like, no, we're actually gonna exert our truth, who we truly are. That's when humans begin to progress, through it be revolution or peaceful submission. Either way, that's when progress happens. Okay, let me skip down to the 35th paragraph, and this is the third line of that paragraph. The new state ideology. The individual is nothing, they declare. It is the collectivity which counts. Nothing less than the complete surrender of the individual will satisfy the insatiable appetite of the new deity, right? And it's very fascinating because Emma Goldman is right, where it's like, you as an individual, you need to put that aside, right? And you need to, serve the values of the state, right? It is funny because, in the United States of America, we attack countries that are more forward in that type of language, right? Like China, or like, a lot of powerful Eastern or Asian countries where it's like, you need to be a lot in alignment with the state, right? And, countries that call themselves communist, right? They, like China or North Korea, they're all about that, very forwardly. But, in many ways, United States of America is the same way, right? Because it's all good when we're individuals, and we even promote that in our culture. We say, we value individualism, except when when it's outside the values of what it means to be America in the popular mainstream, like ideas of feminism, like if you're like queer or gay or transgender, or forms of identity that are kind of different or not in alignment with like the traditional American ideas of identity. Then it's like, oh no, not that. You don't need to be an individual that much. Okay, that's going against what it means to be an American, right? So even America is guilty of that. Even though a lot of times we pretend like, we embrace individuality. No, we don't. We only embrace it when it's in service to American power. When it's a threat to American power, then individuality just goes out the window. So I'm going to go to the 39th paragraph here, and this is the end of the 5th line of that paragraph. Cooperation, as opposed to internecine strife and struggle, has worked for the survival and evolution of the species. Only mutual aid and voluntary cooperation can create the basis for a free individual in an associational life. Yes, right? It's not, I was mistaken before when I first started reading. Emma Goldman is not obsessed with the individual alone. No, what she's really focused on is enabling the individual, through cooperation and collaboration, interconnectedness as individualism. Because the reality, as I was saying before, we're all interconnected, right? We're all dependent on each other to be successful, to grow as human beings. If we don't have each other, we can't grow as human beings, right? We can't succeed. So the only way we can be individual is by being collaborative, by being cooperative. So this is paragraph 43. This is the second sentence I'm starting on. The state and the political and economic institutions it supports can exist only by fashioning the individual to their particular purpose, training him to respect law and order, teaching him obedience, submission and unquestioning faith in the wisdom and justice of government, above all, loyal service and complete self-sacrifice when the state commands it, as in war. That's exactly what I was talking about, right? And this is true today, right? Is this ideology of the individualism. It's fashioning the individual for the particular purpose of the state, which is, law and order. We have certain presidents rah-rah-rahing law and order, and a lot of politicians too. Teaching obedience and submission and unquestioned faith. Not came and just be like, oh, wait a minute. I have a question. I don't necessarily want to fight you. I just have a question. No. You can't do that. Right? You got to be completely loyal. Sacrifice your individuality to the state, and we'll fashion it for you. Right? This is what Emma Goldman's talking about. All right, so now I'm going to go to the 45th paragraph, and this is the third sentence. It is not invention and mechanics which constitute development. The ability to travel at the rate of 100 miles an hour is no evidence of being civilized. True civilization is to be measured by the individual, the unit of all social life, by his individuality and the extent to which it is free to have its being to grow and expand unhindered by invasive and coercive authority. Right? That's what true civilization means, right? How do you measure how civilized the society is? By its ability to enable its individuals to be free to grow and expand unhindered by invasive and coercive authority. And that's how you determine how civilized a society is, not how advanced its technology is. For example, you might say technology, you can use it to enable the individual. But if you're using technology just to control people and exploit people and to keep people aligned with what the state wants and not what actual people want, how is that good for the people in society? Right? It's good for the state, possibly, but it's not good for the individuals. It's uncivilized. So it's kind of like a paradigm shift in a way. Like, okay, so how do we determine how civilized a society is? Not by how advanced its technology is, but by how free individuals are. To be more specific, we're saying how free it is for the individuals of that society to grow and expand unhindered. Grow and expand in terms of their individuality, who they truly are as individuals, to discover their true selves and then to use that truth to enable others to find their true selves. Now we're going to continue on paragraph 48. This is the last sentence. Real freedom, true liberty, is positive. It is freedom to something. It is the liberty to be. Okay, the liberty to be. To be. Right? Not necessarily to do, but to be, but to do as well. In short, the liberty of actual and active opportunity. That sort of liberty is not a gift. It is the natural right of man, of every human being. It cannot be given. It cannot be conferred by any law or government. The need of it, the longing for it, is inherent in the individual. What's that supposed to mean? The whole idea, to use my country as an example, the idea like, well, in the United States you have the right to liberty, right? And it's only thanks to the United States of America that you have that right. If it wasn't for the American state, you would not have that right. So be very thankful to the state of America for granting you that right. Right? So you need to sacrifice to the America because you owe America a debt, because you have the right for liberty and opportunity. You see what's going on there with that's what Emma Goldman is talking about. It's like that's some BS. The state doesn't give you that. That's inherent, being part of a human being. Right? And if a state is telling you that, that's bogus. Right? And they're using that to manipulate you and control you. This is what Emma Goldman is saying. And you know what? It's true. It's true. So Emma Goldman describes to you the philosophy of anarchism. So what is anarchism based off of? I'll just read the last sentence of the 54th paragraph here. It's based on the released energies of the individual and the free association of liberated individuals. Okay, I can get behind that. I'll skip one sentence. The sole legitimate purpose of society is to serve the needs and advance the aspiration of the individual. Only by doing so can it justify its existence and be an aid to progress and culture. I see what Emma Goldman is saying here, and it's I agree. We enable the individual. How we live today is we enable the state. Right? So we got it backwards, right? Our backwards thinking is the individual is supposed to serve the state. No, the state is supposed to serve the individual. Right? That's the problem. Then the anarchist argument is, that the state can never serve the individual because that's not the point of a state. Like, the point of a state is to serve its own needs. So you're never going to have that with the concept of the state. That's what the anarchist argument is. A true society, like a society that actually does good and advances, right, and helps human growth, is a society that promotes, enables, empowers individuals in that society. And I would just further add, to do that, to promote growth and enable individuals to continue to grow, right? There needs to be a focus on cooperation and collaboration, right? Which was what Emma Goldman stated in this essay. It's this idea, and I think it's a true idea, that there's no such thing as independence, really. Now there's individuality, right? I think we have mistaken in our pop culture, we've mistaken individuality for independence. We treat them as synonyms, right? They're the same thing, but they're not. Right? There's no such thing as independence. Nobody is truly independent, but there are individuals that exists. But individuality can only exist through interdependence, right? An acknowledgement of depending on each other, not codependence, like not extreme dependence on others, but codependence, like interdependence, like helping each other out, like mentorship, counseling, mutual aid, being kind to one another, being compassionate to one another, acknowledging people for who they truly are, helping each other when we're down, helping each other when we show our true selves, right? Not rejecting someone's true self, not casting someone's truth aside for the services of some other power, whether that be state or government or whatever. This is how we foster individuality, which is important. Let's not confuse individuality for independence. Two completely different things. I have to say that this essay, it was a great essay, and I'm starting to really understand anarchism better and better. I don't know why I did that. Like, okay, like what's that? I don't know. You already know the name. It's on the description. But yeah, I'm starting to understand anarchism better. Now, I want to read more anarchism philosophy, anarchist texts, and that was great. So I would encourage you, if you're like on the fence, or if you're one of those people that are like highly against like anarchism, or like, whoa, those are some crazy radicals with they have black hoods and a black mask, and they run around and smash cars, and they spray paint the circle with the A on it, and that's their graffiti, and that's all they do. Why don't you check out this essay, the individual, society, and the state, and I think your superficial idea will change. It will change, and you might spark you some conversations with various people, and progressive, constructive, fruitful conversations about, what society should be and what society shouldn't be, and how can we better society, and this, that, and other. Check it out. It's free on the internet. You can just download it. But in any case, you have been watching The Black Ponder. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.